This happening was a gift, and had yearned to hear of while the year was young. And if guests had no subjects as they strolled to their seats, now this serious concern sustained their chatter. And Gawain had been glad to begin the game, but don't be so shocked should the plot turn pear-shaped, for men might be merry when addled with mead, but each year, short-lived, is unlike the last, and rarely resolves in the style it arrived. So the festival finishes, and a new year follows in eternal sequence, season by season. After lavish Christmas comes the lean days of Lent, when the flesh is tested with fish and simple food. When the world's weather wages war on winter, cold shrinks eastward and the clouds climb. Sun-warmed, shimmering rain comes showering onto meadows and fields where flowers unfurled. Woods and grounds wear a wardrobe of green. Birds burble with life and build busily as summer spreads, settling on slopes as it should. Now every hedgerow brims with blossom and with bud, and lively songbirds sing from lofty, leafy woods. Oh, this is some really nice poetry. It is pretty. So summer comes in season with its subtle airs, when the west wind high sighs among shoots and seeds, and those plants which flower and flourish are a pleasure, as their leaves let drip their drink of dew, and they sparkle and glitter when glanced by sunlight. Then autumn arrives, to harden the harvest, and with it comes a warning to ripen before winter. The drying airs arrive, driving up dust from the face of the earth to the heights of heaven, and wild sky wrestles the sun with its winds, and the leaves of the lime lay littered on the ground, and grass that was green turns withered and gray. Then all which had risen over-ripens and rots, and yesterday on yesterday the year dies away, and winter returns, as is the way of the world through time. At Michaelmas? I've never heard that before. Definition. At Michaelmas, the moon stands like that season's sign, a warning to Gawain to rouse himself and ride. Alright, so a full year has passed since the incident with the Green Knight, or close to a year. It's the beginning of winter again, and so Gawain's like, oh, right, it's time for me to fulfill my promise, so I guess he's going to do it. Yet he stayed until All Saints' Day by his sovereign's side, and they feasted in the name of their noble knight with the revels and riches of the Round Table. The lord of that hall and their loving ladies were sad and concerned for the sake of their knight, but nevertheless they made light of his load. Those joyless at his plight made jokes and rejoiced. Then sorrowfully, after supper, he spoke with his uncle, and openly talked of the trip he must take. Now, lord of my life, I must ask for your leave. You were witness to my wager. I have no wish to retell you the terms, they're nothing but a trifle. I must set out tomorrow and receive that stroke from the knight in green, and let God be my guide. Then the cream of Camelot crowded around, Gawain and Eric and others of that ilk, Sir Dodinal the Dreaded, the Duke of Clarence, Lancelot, Lionel, Lucan the Good, and Sir Bors and Sir Bedivere, both big names, and powerful men such as Mador de la Porte. This courtly committee approaches the king to offer up heartfelt advice to our hero, and sounds of sadness and sorrow were heard that one as worthy as well liked as Gawain should suffer that strike, but offer no stroke in reply. Yet, keeping calm, the knight just quipped, "Why should I shy away? If fate is kind or cruel, man still must try." He remained all day, and in the morning he dressed, asked early for his arms, and were produced. First, a rug of rare cloth was unrolled on the floor, heaped with gear which glimmered and gleamed, and the stout knight steps onto it and handles the steel. He tries on his tunic of extravagant silk, then the neatly cut cloak, closed at the neck, its lining finished with a layer of white fur. Then he settled to his feet into steel shoes, and clad his calves, clamped them with greaves, then hinged and highly polished plates were knotted with gold thread to the knight's knees. Then leg guards were fitted, lagging the flesh, attached with thongs to his thick-set thighs. I can't talk. Then comes the suit of shimmering steel rings encased his body and his costly clothes. well-burnished braces to both of his arms, good elbow guards and glinting metal gloves, all the trimmings and trappings of a knight tricked out to ride. A metal suit that shone, gold spurs which gleam with pride, a keen sword swinging from the silk belt to his side. Alright, so Gawain is the OG knight in shining armor. Fastened in his armor, he seemed fabulous, famous, every link looking golden to the very last loop. Yet for all that metal, he still made it to Mass, honored the Almighty before the high altar, like a good Christian boy. After which he comes to the king and his consorts and asks to take leave of the ladies and lords. They escort and kiss him and commend him to Christ. Now Gringolet is rigged out and ready to ride, which a saddle that flickered with fine gold fringes and is set with new studs for the... Then he holds up his helmet and hastily kisses it. It was strongly stapled and its lining was stuffed and sat high on his head, fastened behind with a colorful cloth to cover his neck. Embroidered and bejeweled with brilliant gems on the broad silk border, and with birds on the seams, such as painted parrots perched among periwinkles, and turtle doves and true lovers' knots, tightly entwined as if women had worked at it 7 winters at least. The diamond diadem was greater still. It gleamed with flawless flashing gems, both clear and smoked, it seemed. Then they showed him the shining scarlet shield. This is almost like that My Immortal fanfiction, but actually well written. Then they showed him the shining scarlet shield with its pentacle painted in pure gold. He seized it by its strap and slung it around his neck. He looked well in what he wore and was worthy of it. And why the pentacle was appropriate to that prince I intend to say, though it will stall our story. Alright, well, I appreciate the poet letting us know he's going to go on another tangent. It is a symbol that Solomon once set in place and is taken to this day as a token of fidelity. For the form of the figure is a 5-pointed star, and each line overlaps and links with the last. So is ever eternal, and when spoken of in England is known by the name of the Endless Knot. So it suits this soldier in his spotless armor, fully faithful in 5 ways 5 times over. For Gawain was as good as the purest gold, devoid of vices but virtuous, loyal, and kind. So bore that badge on both his shawl and shield alike, a prince who talked the truth, known as the noblest knight. Yeah, take that, Lancelot, you valor-stealing, wife-stealing. Gawain used to be, like, the number 1 dude, if you haven't gotten this by now. The idea of Lancelot being, like, the best, most virtuous knight of the Round Table, most important, that wouldn't come for, much, much later. It used to be Gawain. First, he was deemed flawless in his 5 senses, and second, his 5 fingers were never at fault, and third, his faith was founded in the 5 wounds Christ received on the cross, as the creed recalls, and fourth, if that soldier struggled in skirmish, one thought pulled him through above all things. One thought pulled him through above all other things. The fortitude he found in the 5 joys which Mary had conceived in her Son, our Savior. For precisely that reason, the princely rider had the shape of her image inside his shield, so by catching her eye, his courage would not crack. The 5th set of 5, which I heard the knight followed, included friendship and fraternity with fellow men, and purity and politeness that impressed at all times, and pity which surpassed all pointedness. 5 things which meant more to Gawain than to most other men. So these 5 sets of 5 were fixed in this knight, each linked to the last, through the endless line, a 5-pointed form which never failed, never stronger to one side or slack at the other, but unbroken in its being from beginning to end. However, its trail is tracked and traced. So the star on the spangling shield he sported shone royally, in gold, on a ruby-red background, the pure pentacle as people have called it for years. Then, lance in hand, held high, he got up in his gear. He bids them all goodbye, one final time, he fears. Spiked with the spurs, the steeds sped away, with such force that the 5 stones sparked underfoot. All sighed at the sight, and with sinking hearts they whispered their worries to one another, concerned for their comrade. A pity, by Christ, if a lord so noble should lose his life. To find his equal on earth would be far from easy. Cleverer to have acted with caution and care, deemed him a duke, a title he was due, a leader of men, lords of many lands. Better that than being battered to oblivion, beheaded by an ogre through headstrong pride. Whoever knew of any king to take counsel of a knight in the grip of an engrossing Christmas game? Warm tears welled up in their weepy eyes, as gallant Sir Gawain galloped from court that day. He sped from home and hearth, and went his winding way on steep and snaking paths, just as the story says. Now through England's realm he rides and rides, Sir Gawain, God's servant, on his grim quest, passing long, dark nights, unloved and alone. Foraging to feed, finding little to call food, with no friend but his horse, through forests and hills, and only our Lord in heaven to hear him. He wanders near to the north of Wales, with the Isles of Anglesey off to the left. He keeps to the coast, fording each course, crossing at Holyhead, and coming ashore in the wilds of the Wirral, where wayward people, both God and good men, have quite given up on. And he constantly inquires of those he encounters if they know or not, in this neck of the woods, of a great green man or a green chapel. No, they say, never. Never in their lives. They know of neither a chap nor a chapel so strange. He trails through bleak terrain, his mood and manner change at every twist and turn towards that chosen church. In a strange region, he scales steep slopes. Far from his friend, he cuts a lonely figure. Where he bridges a brook or wades through a waterway, it's no surprise to find that he faces a foe so foul or fierce he is bound to use force. So momentous are his travels among the mountains, to tell just a tenth would be a tall order. Here he scraps with serpents and snarling wolves. Here he tangles with wadwoes. Wadwoes? I'm gonna have to look up what that is. But it sounds cool, whatever it is. Here he tangles with those things, wadwoes, causing trouble in the crags, or with bulls and bears and the old wild boar. Hard on his heels through the highlands come giants. Only diligence and faith in the face of death will keep him from becoming a corpse or carrion. And the wars were one thing, but winter was worse. Clouds shed their cargo of crystallized rain, which froze as it fell to the frost-glazed earth. Okay, I'm sorry. I just need to gush. That's some really, really good writing in those two lines. Oh my word. That's fantastic. Sorry. Nearly slain by sleet, he slept in his armor. But bivoked in the blackness among bare rocks, where meltwater streamed from snow-capped summits, and high overhead hung chandeliers of ice. Chandeliers of ice. Man, this is cool imagery. So in peril and pain, Sir Gawain made progress, crisscrossing the countryside until Christmas Eve. Then, at the time of tiding, he prayed to the highest heaven. Let Mother Mary guide him toward some house or haven. That morning, he moves on, skirts the mountainside, descends a deep forest, densely overgrown, with vaulting hills to each half of the valley and ancient oaks in huddles of hundreds. Hazel and hawthorn are interwoven, decked and draped in damp, shaggy moss, and bedraggled birds on bare black branches pipe pitifully into the piercing cold. Under cover of the canopy, he girded Gringolet through mud and marshland, a man all alone, concerned and afraid in case he should fail in the worship of our deity, who, on that day, was born the Virgin Son to save our souls. He prayed with heavy heart, Father, hear me, and Lady Mary, our mother most mild, let me happen on some house where mass might be heard, and matins in the morning meekly I ask, and here I utter my patter, Ave and Creed. He rides the path and prays, dismayed by his misdeeds, and signs Christ's cross and says, Be near me in my need. No sooner had he signed himself 3 times than he became aware, in those woods, of high walls in a moat on a mound bordered by the boughs and thick trunk timber which trimmed the water. The most commanding castle a knight ever kept, positioned in a site of sweeping parkland, with a palisade of pikes pitched in the earth, in the midst of tall trees for 2 miles or more. He stopped and stared at one side of that stronghold as it sparkled and shone within shimmering oaks, and with helmet in hand he offered up thanks to Jesus and St. Julian, both gentle and good, who had courteously heard him and heeded his cry. A lodging, at last, so allow it, my lord. Then he girded Gringolet with his gilded spurs, and purely by chance chose the principal approach to the building, which brought him to the edge of the bridge with haste. The drawbridge stood withdrawn, the front gates were shut fast. Such well-constructed walls would blunt the storm's wind blast. In the saddle of his steed he halts on the slopes of the delving moat with its double ditch. Out of water of wondrous depths, the walls then loomed overhead to a huge height, course after course of crafted stone. Then battlements embellished in the boldest style, and turrets arranged around the ramparts with lockable loopholes set into the lookouts. The knight had not seen a more stunning structure. Further in, his eye was drawn to a hall, attended, architecturally, by many tall towers with a series of spires spiking the air, all crowned by carvings exquisitely cut. Uncountable chimneys the color of chalk rose from the roof and sparkled in the sun. So perfect was that vision of painted pinnacles clustered with the castle's enclosure, it appeared that the place was cut from paper. Then a notion occurred to that noble knight, to seek a visit, get invited inside, to be hosted and housed, and all the holy days remain. Responding to his call, a pleasant porter came, a watchman on the wall who welcomed Sir Gawain. "Good morning," said Gawain. "Will you go with a message to the lord of this house to let me have lodging?" "By St. Peter," said the porter, "it'll be my pleasure, and I'll warrant you'll be welcome for as long as you wish." Then he went on his way, but came back at once with a group who had gathered to greet the stranger. The drawbridge came down, and they crossed the ditch, and knelt in the frost in front of the knight, and welcomed this man in a way deemed worthy. Then he yielded to their guest, yanked open the gate, and bidded them to rise as he rode across the bridge. He was assisted from the saddle by several men, and the strongest among them stabled his steed. Then knights and the squires of knights drew near to escort him with courtesy into the castle. As he took off his helmet, many hasty hands stretched to receive it and to serve this noble knight, and his sword and shield were taken aside. Then he made himself known to the noblest knights, and proud fellows pressed forward to confer their respects. Still heavy with armor, he was led to the hall, where a fire burned bright with the fiercest flames. Then the master of the manor emerged from his chamber to greet him in the hall with all due honor, saying, "Behave in my house as your pleasure pleases. To whatever you want you are welcome. Do what you will." "My thanks," Gawain exclaimed. "May Christ reward you well." Then firmly, like good friends, arm in arm, they fell. Gawain gazed at the lord who greeted him so gracefully, the great one who governed that grand estate, powerful and large in the prime of his life, with a bushy beard as red as a beaver's, steadily in his stance, solid of build, with a fiery face and fine conversation. And it suited him well, so it seemed to Gawain, to keep such a castle and captain his knights. Quickly the lord escorts him to his quarters, insisting a servant be assigned to assist Gawain, and many were willing to wait on his word. Well, so after a long journey of just being cold and miserable, looks like things are really looking up for Gawain. He's found himself a buddy who lives in an awesome castle. This is definitely not suspicious and is going to go very well. They brought him to a bedroom, beautifully furnished with fine silken fabrics, finished in gold, and curious coverlets lavishly quilted in bright ermine and embroidered to each border. Curtains ran on cords through red gold rings. Tapestries from Toulouse and Turkestan were fixed against walls and fitted underfoot. With humorous banter, Gawain was helped out of his chainmail coat and costly clothes. Then they rushed to bring him an array of robes of the choicest cloth. He chose and changed and as soon as he stood in that stunning gown with its flowing skirts which suited his shape, it almost appeared to the persons present that spring, with its spectrum of colors, had sprung. So alive and lean were that young man's limbs, a nobler creature Christ had never created, they declared. This knight, whose country was unclear, now seemed to them by sight a prince without a peer, in fields where fierce men fight. In front of a flaming fireside, a chair was pulled into place for Gawain, and padded with covers and quilts all cleverly stitched. Then a cape was cast across the knight of rich brown cloth with embroidered borders, finished inside with the finest furs, ermine to be exact, and a hood which echoed it. Resplendently dressed, he settled in his seat. As his limbs thawed, so his thoughts lightened. Soon a table was set on sturdy trestles, covered entirely with a clean white cloth of cruets of salt and silver spoons. In a while he washed and went to his meal. Staff came quickly and served him in style, with several soups all seasoned to taste, double helpings as was fitting, and a feast of fish, some baked in bread, some browned over flames, some boiled or steamed, some stewed in spices and subtle sauces which the knight savored. 4 or 5 times he called it a feast, and the courteous company happily cheered him along. On penance plates you dine, there's better boar to come. The warming, heady wine then freed his mind for fun. And this poem is constantly making me really hungry. Now through tactful talk and tentative inquiry, polite questions are put to this prince. He responds respectfully and speaks of his journey from the court of Arthur, king of Camelot, the royal ruler of the Round Table, and he says they now sit with Gawain himself, who has come here at Christmas time quite by chance. Once the Lord had gathered that his guest is Gawain, he likes it so well that he laughs out loud. All the men of that manor were of the same mind, being happy and appear promptly at his presence. This person famed for prowess and purity, whose noble skills were sung to the skies, whose life was the stuff of legend and lore. Then Knight spoke softly to Knight, saying, "Watch now, we'll witness his graceful ways, hear the faultless phrasings of flawless speech." Flawless speech? Well, that's not going to be in this reading, because I'm bad at talking. If we listen, we will learn the merits of language, since we have in our hall a man of high honor. Ours is a graceful and giving God to grant that we welcome Gawain as our guest. As we sing of his birth who was born to save us, we few shall learn a lesson here, in tact and manners true, and hopefully we'll hear love's tender language too. Once dinner was done, Gawain drew to his feet, and darkness neared as day became dusk. Chaplains went off to the castle's chapel to sound the bells hard, to signal the hour of evensong, summoning each and every soul. The Lord goes alone, then his lady arrives, concealing herself in a private pew. Gawain attends too. Tugged by his sleeve, he is steered to a seat, led by the Lord, who greets Gawain by name as his guest. "No man in the world is more welcome," are his words. For that he is thanked, and they hug then and there, and sit as pair through the service and prayer. Then she, who desired to see this stranger, came from her closet with her sisterly crew. She was fairest among them. Her face, her flesh, her complexion, her quality, her bearing, her body, more glorious than Guinevere, or so Gawain thought. And in the chancel of the church they exchanged courtesies. She was hand in hand with a lady to her left, someone altered by age, an ancient dame, well respected it seemed by the servants at her side. Those ladies were not the least bit alike. One woman was young, one withered by years. The body of the beauty seemed to bloom with blood. The cheeks of the crone were wattled and slack. One was clothed in a kerchief clustered with pearls, which shone like snow on the slopes of her upper breast and bright bare throat. The other was noosed and knotted at the neck, her chin enveloped in chalk-white veils, her forehead fully enfolded in silk, which detailed designs at the edges and hems, nothing bare except for the black of her brows, and the eyes and nose and naked lips which were chapped and bleared and a sorrowful sight. A grand old mother, a matriarch she might be hailed. Her trunk was square and squat, her buttocks bulged and swelled. Most men would sooner squint at Most men would sooner squint at her whose hand she held. Alright, I get it. Old ugly lady, beautiful hot lady. Then Gawain glanced at the gracious-looking woman, and by leave of the Lord he approached those ladies, saluting the elder with a long, low bow, holding the other for a moment in his arms, kissing her respectfully and speaking with courtesy. They request his acquaintance, and he quickly offers. And quickly he offers to serve them unswervingly should they say the word. They take him between them and talk as they walk to a hearth full of heat, and hurriedly ask for specially spiced cakes, which are speedily fetched, and wine filled each goblet again and again. Frequently the Lord would leap to his feet, insisting that mirth and merriment be made. Hauling off his hood, he hoisted it on a spear, a prize, he promised, to the person providing the most comfort and cheer at Christmas time. And my fellows and friends shall help in my fight to see that it hangs from no head but my own. So the laughter of that lord lights up the room, and Gawain and the gathering are gladdened by games till late. So late, his lordship said, that lamps should burn with light. Then blissful, bound for bed, Sir Gawain waved good night. So the morning dawns when a man remembers that the day of our Redeemer was born to die, and every house on earth is joyful for Lord Jesus. Every household, including yours, right? Their day was no different, being a diary of delights. Banquets and buffets were beautifully cooked and dutifully served to dinners on the dais. The ancient elder sat highest at the table, with the Lord, I believe, in the chair to her left. Oh. So the old woman is sitting at the head of the table, and the Lord of the castle is on her left. That's interesting. That's interesting. I have a theory about this, but I'll talk about that at the very end of all of this. The sweeter one and Gawain took seats in the center, and were first at the feast to dine. Then food was carried around as custom decrees, and served to each man as his status deserved. There was feasting, there was fun, and such feelings of joy as could not be conveyed by quick descriptions, yet to tell it in detail would take too much time. But I'm aware that Gawain and the beautiful woman found such comfort and closeness in each other's company through warm exchanges and whispered words and refined conversations, free from foulness, that their pleasure surpassed all princely sports by far. Beneath the din of drums, men followed their affairs, and trumpets thrilled and thrummed as those two tended theirs. They drank and danced all day, and the next, and danced and drank the day after that. Then St. John's Day passed, with a gentler joy, as the Christmas feasting came to a close. Guests were to go in the grayness of dawn, so they laughed and dined as the dusk darkened, swaying and swirling to music and song. Then, at last, in the lateness, they up and left, toward distant parts along different paths. Gawain offered his goodbyes, but was ushered by his host to his host's own chamber, in the heat of its chimney waylaid by the Lord, so the Lord might thank him profoundly and profusely for the favor he had shown in honoring his house at that hallowed season, and lighting every corner of the castle with his character. For as long as I live, my life shall be better that Gawain was my guest at God's own feast. By God, said Gawain, but the gratitude goes to you. May the High King of Heaven repay your honor. Your requests are now this night's commands. I am bound by your bidding. No boon is too high to say. At length his lordship tried to get his guest to stay, but proud Gawain replied that he must now make his way. Yeah, Gawain's had his fun, but he remembered he's got a mission. He's got to find the Green Knight. Then the lord of the castle inquired courteously of what desperate deed in the depths of winter should coax him from Camelot so quickly and alone before Christmas was over in his king's court. What you ask, said the knight, you shall have now. A most pressing matter pries me from that place. I myself am summoned to seek out a site, and I have not the faintest idea where to find it. But find it I must, by the first of the year, and not fail for all the acres in England, so the Lord help me. Consequently, this inquiry I come to ask of you, that you tell me, in truth, if you have heard the tale of a green chapel, and the grounds where it stands, or the guardian of those grounds who is colored green. For I am bound by a bond agreed by us both, to link up with him there, should I live that long. As dawn on New Year's Day draws near, if God sees fit, I shall face that freak more happily than I would the most wondrous wealth. With your blessing, therefore, I must follow my feet. In 3 short days my destiny is due, and I would rather drop dead than default from duty. Wow, Gawain is dedicated. Then, laughing, the lord of the house said,
"Stay longer. I'll direct you to your rendezvous when the time is right. You'll get to the Green Chapel, so give up your grieving. You can bask in your bed, bide your time, save your fond farewells till the first of the year, and still meet him by mid-morning to do as you might. So stay. A guide will get you there, at dawn on New Year's Day. The place you need is near, 2 miles at most away."
Oh snap, so we're real close to the Green Chapel. Then Gawain was giddy with gladness and declared, "For this more than anything I thank you thoroughly, and shall work to do well at whatever you wish until that time, attending every task." The lord squeezed Gawain's arm and seated him at his side, and called for the ladies to keep him company. There was pleasure aplenty in their private talk. The lord delighted in such lively language, like a man who might well be losing his mind. Then, speaking to Gawain, he suddenly shouted,
"You have sworn to serve me. Whatever I instruct, will you hold to that oath right here and now?"
"Uh-oh. Oh no. Oh boy." "You may trust my tongue," said Gawain in truth, "for within these walls I am servant to your will." Oh, this is definitely going to go well. The lord said warmly,
"You were weary and worn, hollow with hunger, harrowed by tiredness, yet joined in my reveling right royally every night. You relax as you like. Lie in your bed until mass tomorrow, then go to your meal where my wife will be waiting. She will sit at your side to accompany and comfort you in my absence from court. So lounge. At dawn I'll rise and ride to hunt with horse and hound."
Oh, okay. So the lord just told him to chill. Just relax. I'll go hunting. You just relax. My wife will be here to help you out with whatever you need. The gracious knight agreed, and, bending low, he bowed.
"Furthermore," said the master, "let's make a pact. Here's a wager. What I win in the woods will be yours, and what you gain while I'm gone, you will give back to me. Young sir, let's swap and strike a bond. Let a bargain be a bargain, for better or worse."
Interesting, okay. More games. "By God," said Gawain, "I agree to the terms, and find it pleasing that you favor such fun."
"Let drink be served, and we'll seal the deal,"
the lord cried loudly, and everyone laughed. So they reveled and caroused uproariously, those lords and ladies, for as long as they liked. Then, within immaculate exchanges of manners and remarks, they slowed, and they stood, and they spoke softly. And with parting kisses the party dispersed, footmen going forward with flaring torches, and everybody was brought to their bed at long last to dream. Before they part, the pair repeat their pact again. The lord was well aware of how to host a game. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is part 2 of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The part of the story that every time they make a movie about it, they always just add a ton of stuff to pad out the runtime for some reason. And what was in here, I think, is much better. Anyways, so things are looking up for Gawain. The Green Chapel is near. He's going to be guided to it. All he has to do is just relax and chill in this castle for the next 3 days. And although the Lord did give him another game, the Lord is going to go out and do some hunting and bring back his kill. And Gawain, in turn, has to then give the Lord anything that he happens to get whilst lounging around in the castle. Weird rules again. Let's see where this goes. See you next time in part 3.